Welcome to Metro Talk. I'm Kent Scheffel. Thanks for being with us. Sam Stem is here. Sam's the president and general manager of WBGZ. Welcome, Sam.
Glad to be back.
And Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph, is alongside. Welcome, Jim.
And vice president.
And vice president of the Telegraph. Jim, Illinois is dropping the dropping writing from the state's Prairie State Achievement Exam. The state says it's going to save about $2.4 million. Does it make sense to drop the writing portion of that exam and keep just the reading and arithmetic sections?
No. Especially the reason that they gave for it. We all know the state is in a physical crisis, and their excuse was the writing portion of the Prairie State exams are the most expensive to judge, the most expensive to grade, because you have to have real people go in and read them. You can't have a little computer figure out the fill in the dot things. And besides, the federal government doesn't require it for No Child Left Behind, so therefore we don't require our writing proficiency anymore, which just amazes me. We further dumbed down our, I guess in this particular case, the juniors in high school. As an employer and certainly as someone that's in the media and journalism,
writers.
You need writers. In Sam's business, if someone can't communicate both verbally and in written skills, they don't get hired. And I don't care if that's a salesperson position or if that's an on-air personality. You have to be able to write, you have to be able to communicate, you have to not only understand what the subject matter is, but then rewrite that subject matter so that it's intelligible to your listening audience, or in my case, your readership. And now we're just going to say, well, we don't have to do that anymore. We're going to believe that because they can spell and read, automatically they can understand fully the content. It just, I continue to scratch my head over it. Regularly we get some kind of a news story comes out that says the United States has fallen further down the ladder of either educated students or the number of engineers or the number of doctors or the number of scientists that the world is cranking out. And as a austerity move in the state of Illinois, we're not going to require you to write anymore. You wrote questions based on subject matter that we're going to discuss today. You didn't email them to me with LOLs and OMGs and all of those little things. You had to write, you had to spell, and you had to make them understandable in two or three sentences. I believe this is short-sighted, and just because the federal government doesn't require it, or just because you've eliminated writing from the I guess it's the 5th grade and the 8th grade test, we're now going to eliminate it for juniors, and then they're going to get into college, and the first time they turn in a paper, I suspect that the professor's going to have a field day with it.
Sam, does it make sense for the state to eliminate writing from the Prairie State Achievement Exam?
Not to me, but maybe I'm just an old fuddy-duddy. You know, they say, well, you know, we're going to replace that exercise with things like keyboarding and all of that. But, you know, it doesn't matter what enterprise you're looking at. There are some basic building blocks to everything. And I think what the elimination of this requirement really points out is the fact that maybe we need to get back to local control over our educational processes. State achievement tests, federal requirements, all they are is big bureaucracies that, in essence, measure all kinds of things except what they really need to measure, and that is the achievement of students. And shouldn't we do that locally anyway? Quite frankly, if you're not going to require children to write, I look back and remember my time in school, even though it it gets further and further in the past with every
We're the
passing
same
year.
age, guys.
You know, Jim talked about, well, you know, just because you can still spell, if you can't write, you know, you're not going to be able to get along. Well, as I recall, part of the exercises that we carried out was writing out our spelling words. In part because the very process of writing it and forming the letters helped you learn how to retain the spelling of that word. So if you're not going to require writing anymore, what are you going to do? Keyboard your spelling words? And, you know, I made this point on my radio program this past week. I'm sure it's more educated people than I, and people who understand the educational process better than I, perhaps, that made this kind of a decision. But what are you going to do when you're stuck on a desert isle and you need to put a note in a bottle and nobody's ever taught you how to write? You know, your smartphone's going to be dead, so you can't keyboard it. So at the very least, it's a survival method. But no, you know, you go back, and it's always been true that the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, were the basis of everything else that follows that. If you can't read, if you can't write, if you can't do arithmetic, you're not going to be able to do anything else. No other educational process is going to work. And so to de-emphasize writing at this point in time just doesn't make any sense to me. And Jim's somebody that's, you know, that hires people on a regular basis. So do I. You talk to anybody else that tries to hire people. It's unbelievable how dreadful so many of the candidates are. You get resumes that you know, you don't even consider that candidate because they go immediately into the waste paper basket. If that's the best they can do in terms of putting together a resume with misspellings and sentence structure and all that, in a day and age when we have spell check and grammar check, and they can't even do that much, this is only going to make matters worse and puts our country at an even greater competitive disadvantage.
And the spell check is just a lazy man's way. You know, as we know, and you see it, I see it, you see it at the college level, nobody knows the difference between there, and there.
Right.
Or your, and your. And spell check doesn't catch it because your is right. In all of those instances, it's spelled correctly. It's just not used correctly.
Yeah, but when it comes spelled Y-E-R, then, you know, that's even worse.
LOL.
Because they, you know, they didn't have the effort to push the spell check button.
That's the Southern spelling, that's all.
Yeah.
Well,
We need to take a break. We'll have more in a moment.
Hi, I'm Audrey Lucchese, and I'm from Alton, Illinois. I love music, and that's why I came to Lewis & Clark. It's been an amazing experience here at Lewis & Clark, working with students that are so talented, coming from all over the area, and they work so hard to follow their dreams. The music faculty at Lewis & Clark they're fantastic, and they're there every step of the way to push you to follow your dreams. One of the unique opportunities that I have had at Lewis & Clark is being able to record my own music with a fellow student here. Being able to record our music has opened doors for us in the music industry. My long-term goal is to finish here at Lewis & Clark and then to transfer to a 4-year school and finish my degree in music performance. I would recommend Lewis & Clark to another student because it is definitely a great place to get started and it can open so many doors for you.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
This is Metro Talk. I'm Kent Scheffel. Jim Schrader and Sam Stemmer here. Sam, analysts say Governor Quinn has his hands tied to a certain extent when it comes to the gambling bill that's sitting on his desk. Some of the analysts are saying that he doesn't want to add so much gambling to the state, but if he eliminates some of the casinos, he's also going to alienate some of the lawmakers who have casinos in those designated areas. Does Quinn have any good options here? What should he do?
Well, welcome to the governor's mansion. You wanted the job, this is what you got to deal with. And yeah, it is a political dilemma. There are many legislators who have a problem with continuing to expand gambling, but when they see some benefit for their district, well, they might hold their nose and go along with it. So, if at some point in time Quinn says, well, we can send it here, but we're not going to send it there, then he starts to lose some of that support, and it does make it a difficult decision. I think Quinn's dilemma is a symptom of a larger problem, and that is at some point in time, you've got to just admit that there aren't any other easy ways to bring in revenue. And at some point in time, you have to address the spending problem. They're dealing with that in Washington right now. And they haven't really dealt with it in Springfield. We raised the income tax on individuals by 67%. We raised the corporate income tax. We've imposed a lot of other fees and revenue enhancements. And yet the budget isn't even close to being balanced. And at some point in time, you got to quit looking for easy ways to bring in additional revenue, because that's not going to solve the problem. So maybe the governor needs to look at this bill and either hold his nose and sign it as is, because if he doesn't, he may not get the revenue he's looking for. But ultimately, he and the leaders in the legislature will have to address the real problem, and that is spending. And so far, they haven't done that, and they likely won't do it for better than a year now, because we're coming up on an election year, and nobody's going to make major cuts in spending until after the fall of 2012. So it's going to be another almost 2 years before they get to the point where they deal with the real problem.
Now, it wasn't too many months ago that we said they couldn't do an income tax increase because we were coming up on an election.
Well, but they did, but the election that really counts is still more than a year into the future. So they did the income tax increase at the point in time where there was a window to do that, and they just hope everybody will forget.
Holding your nose is the perfect description of what has to go on in government. It's like the old adage that nobody wants to see how sausage is made. It's a matter of negotiating things, and some things you're going to like and some things you're not going to like, and some things you would rather they take some other way, shape, or form. But you've got Governor Quinn saying, I've got to have a capital bill. The state has to have a capital bill. And the legislature comes back and says, okay, but this is how we see we can pay for it, because I don't know any other way. And we just came out of a lawsuit that said, because we put in a laundry list of things to pay for the capital bill, that didn't pass muster. Well, now the Supreme Court said, yeah, it did, so let it go. So we have a combination of things, including expanding gambling in the state of Illinois, to create jobs, as Governor Quinn says. He wants to be the building governor, and he wants to be the job-creating governor. Well, I can make the point that 5 new casinos would also create jobs. It hasn't been too long ago that Argosy was the largest employer in Alton. It's still one of the larger. It's not the largest anymore, but it's one of the larger. You add 5 new casinos to this state, and that will create new jobs in those areas. I can make the point that some of those casino jobs will actually be around longer than the construction jobs, because in theory, once the highways are completed, those contractors have to go somewhere else and find something else to build, And if the casino is profitable and ongoing, those jobs will remain. He doesn't like it. A lot of people don't like it. There's a lot of things about government we don't like, but if on the one hand you say we have to have this spending bill, then unless you can come up with some other way to fund it that doesn't include gambling or another tax increase, then you hold your nose and say, well, the ends justify the means here.
Let me throw you a curveball here with no time to think about this. If you're Dan Beiser, Dwight K., Bill Hain, and all of this gambling expansion is on the table, do you vote for that knowing that it could hurt the casinos in your region, but ultimately provide more money for the state?
Well, I suspect that they would look at that and say, okay, to make myself look good to the constituents, I'll vote no, but overall it's going to pass because it came out of both the House and the Senate, and their votes are probably not going to block it. I'm sure that Argosy doesn't like it. I'm sure that Argosy, then the Alton Bell in 1991, when they got the first license in the state of Illinois to open a casino in Alton, didn't like the idea when East St. Louis got a casino. And they didn't like the idea when Missouri passed laws allowing boats and moats, and the casino industry exploded in St. Louis. Any more than I would like it if another newspaper came to town and wanted to start a new newspaper, or if Sam had another radio station, a pop-up out here and say, I'm going to go after those dollars. Nobody likes that, but you have to compete in a changing climate, and just because it may hurt somebody in your backyard, you can throw them a bone and vote against it, but in this particular case, it's not going to stop it.
The bottom line is that the state can't license enough casinos, can't raise taxes enough, can't do anything to solve its current economic woes. The only thing that's going to solve that is for the economy to recover and for unemployment to go from 9.2% back down to 5%, where it was for the better part of a decade. We get to what is, in essence, virtual full employment. You put that many more taxpayers on the rolls, and that will solve the state and the federal government's economic woes. And that's the only thing that's going to work. You can't build enough highways, you can't license enough casinos, you can't raise taxes enough to solve the issue. And ultimately, I think what government has to realize is that government doesn't create jobs, business creates jobs. Government needs to become business friendly and put businesses in a position where they can go out and expand their staffs and hire people and put more taxpayers on the rolls, and that will solve everything.
What we've almost come full circle back to is the government creating the WPA and the Civilian Conservation Corps and creating jobs, just hiring people, and I don't want to imply that it's make work, but the government continues to be one of the largest employers by default. By saying we're going to fund this issue over here, which is creating contractor jobs. But if the government doesn't have the money, those jobs aren't created.
And there's plenty of evidence that says that the WPA and the CCC didn't end the Great Depression. World War II did.
Absolutely.
We need to take a break. We'll have more Metro Talk right after this.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Clark Minute. Today we're going to check out the radio broadcasting program in WLCA with Mike Lemons.
Have you ever listened to your favorite radio station or your favorite disc jockey and say, I could do that? Or maybe you're the type of person who says, I could never do something like that. Well, with the help of first-year mass comm student John, we're going to show you just how easy it is. Each voice intro starts with talking about the band that just played, and we add a station identifier. Next, you want to offer some information that may be of interest to your audience. And finally, tell the listeners what the next song is, who sings it, followed by another station identifier. John will do one live now.
Silver Sun Pickup Substitution on WLCA. The Big Pink released their debut album called A Brief History of Love. This single is off that album. It's The Big Pink with Dominoes. It's on College Radio's Best, 89.9.
This has been your Lewis and Clark Minute.
What's that? I don't know. Something I kind of made. Ooh, what's it do?
What do I do? Well, thanks for asking. I ring my bell and I like to dance. What do I do? Well, thanks for asking.
Ow! Yeah, it still needs a little work.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions or just play some games at inventnow.org.
Sounds like you could use some Van Gogurt. It's fortified with arch-rich nutrients to improve your math and reading skills. Catch!
Van Gogurt, thanks. So what's the deal with your ear?
Always with the ear, huh?
Feed your kids the arts. For 10 simple ways to learn how, visit AmericansForTheArts.org.
You're watching Metro Talk. I'm Kent Shuffle. Sam Stem and Jim Schrader are here. Sam, the National Institute for Money and State Politics, is studying lobbying efforts in all of the 50 states and says it's having trouble getting the necessary information in Illinois. That's a surprise, isn't it?
What?
Should Illinois be more transparent in its lobbying?
Well, do you even have to ask the question? I mean, you know, if the National Institute for Money and State Politics can't get the info, then apparently there does need to be more transparency. Illinois has a well-deserved reputation as being one of the more corrupt states in the Union. And, you know, despite attempts from time to time to rattle the saber a little bit and pound the chest and say, well, you know, we're reforming state government, it just never really seems to happen. And quite frankly, I don't think it can be done in Springfield. It's going to have to be done in Chicago, because we all know that the Chicago machine, whether you believe it exists or not, there are tentacles coming out of Chicago that reach all the way to Springfield, always have and continue to. And you know, the fact that a Daley is no longer mayor of Chicago really hasn't changed anything, because it's a Daley disciple with tentacles that go all the way to Washington, D.C. that has taken over the machine. And you know, I don't have a whole lot of hope that anything's going to change in the near future. We've talked before here, and there's been a lot of discussion about, well, will the conviction of Rod Blagojevich send a message that it's no longer business as usual? Well, it didn't send a message when George Ryan went to prison. It didn't send a message when Dan Walker went to prison, and it didn't send a message when Otto Kerner went to prison. Why should it send a message, you know, when Rod Blagojevich eventually is locked up and they throw away the key for 10 years or so? So yes, we do need more transparency, but how do we get it? I don't have a clue.
Well, and you know, if we were ever to get tough on lobbying efforts, think of all of those lobbyists that would be added to the unemployment rolls. I mean, you know, we've got a jobs government here that we have to be concerned about how these people make their living. You're not going to be able to follow that process. It is not to the betterment of the government officials to become more transparent on where the lobbying money goes and how many millions of dollars are funneled through Chicago and through Springfield. Now, we're not trying to buy favoritism here. We're just, you know, making a donation to your re-election campaign or similar thing. Or we're going to take you on this junket to an all-inclusive resort somewhere, but you know, this is just for informational purposes only, and it's not the fact that you can take your wife and your kids and everybody else on it. They don't want people to know. It's like campaign reform. We're going to put a fresh coat of paint on it and say we really fixed the problem, where, you know, the rust is still eating through the car. You just paint over the top of it. It's not really going to fix the problem. We have government officials that don't want us to know what goes on. they are the ones that are served by the lobbying fees. They are the ones that are beholding in many cases to these lobbyists. It funnels lots of money into campaigns. It funnels lots of money into coffers that we don't know about. And the fact that Illinois hides it, not a whole lot different than some of the other states that have been painted with the same brush. And in some cases, it's millions of dollars there too, and there's been elected officials that get nabbed and go to jail for that too. In Rob Blagojevich's case, there's no evidence that he ever collected any money on what he was charged and found guilty of. In the case of Ryan, he really did, you know, and so it's not really going to change anything.
And keep in mind, I don't have a problem with lobbying. I indirectly engage in lobbying. My radio station belongs to the National Association of Broadcasters and the Illinois Broadcasters Association, and those two groups lobby on behalf of my industry. I hate the fact that, you know, I'm constantly solicited for donations to the lobbying arms of those organizations. I'd like to think that you know, we could get a fair hearing before our legislators without having to lobby, but that's the way the game is played. And I'm sure, you know, the newspaper industry has its lobbying arm, and I think community colleges even have a lobbying arm. And there's nothing wrong with that. The key is that, you know, it is important to have that transparency, so you know which legislators and which elected officials have taken money from which groups. So at the very least, the electorate can make a judgment and say, well, you know, is that guy doing this because he thinks it's what's best for his constituency, or is he doing it because he's bought and paid for?
And before some people get self-righteous about it, we have union groups where a portion of the dues go to lobbying efforts. You have religious organizations and church groups that a fair amount of their money goes into those efforts. Cancer societies, heart associations, lung associations, you know, the Autism Society, all of those organizations have lobbying arms, and a portion of those donations go into those efforts. So it's not, well, we have somebody coming in, you know, paying off some legislator somewhere so we can keep the tax on booze down. We have other organizations that are lobbying just as hard in other areas.
That's going to do it for this edition of Metro Talk. Thanks for being with us. Jim Schrader, the publisher of the Telegraph, has been here, along with Sam Stem, the president and general manager of WBGZ. I'm Kent Shuffle. We'll see you next time. Don't forget, you can catch us anytime on the web at www.lc.edu. Thanks.